to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is Monday, May the 19th. This is the A block, which means we start just a little bit after the top of the hour. John, young people are saying, top of the hour? What does that mean? What does that mean, John?
It's just a few minutes away from quarter past, Brad. And not to be confused with half past monkeys blank, quarter to is blank, you know?
John's got all the answers. It's a Monday. Like I said, this is A block, and we'd be remiss in saying, wow, Friday, the storms really caused some horrendous damage and some deaths. Very sad situation. Still recovering in the St. Louis area. And the amazing thing about this is, John, for those of you who've lived in the area for a while, normally it's the counties that get nailed, like Jefferson, Warren, Franklin, St. Charles County. And for some crazy reason, a lot of times it's the trailer parks. This time it was like the rich people's neighborhood, the Ladues, the Claytons, the Richmond Heights, the U cities, and then the north and south cities. My son lives in South City, and he now tells me his electric won't be back on till tomorrow, maybe even Wednesday. So a lot of people still suffering from the storms, and it's very sad we have the deaths. And tremendous damage of a lot of these historic old homes. If you've seen some of these pictures, John, it's just horrible.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of this on social media, and friends were texting me over the weekend pictures from their neighborhoods. It's devastating.
Matter of fact, I have to tell you something. I'm going to do a mea culpa here, because I said on the air on Friday I was going to go down on Saturday and pick up my Save KWMU sign that they were giving away. Remember I told you about they're giving away
I do remember
the
that.
yard signs. And I opted not to because of the fact that in that area there were some road closures. And matter of fact, listening to other radio stations that morning talk about the fact that there were a lot of lane restrictions and problems. So I did not get my Save my KWMU sign. John, are you I was going to get two. One for you, one for me. You put it out in your house up there. So I'd put it, matter of fact, I was going to put it at mine at the transmitter sites to essentially show that, I'm that good guy that even though they're my competitors and they take all my money and they don't pay any taxes, they take my tax money, but they don't give me back any money in return. And they've never returned my phone calls about me trying to sell my advertising, John. I think you're right. I think it'll be the end of the month when the intern clears out the voicemail with KWMU, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's what'll happen. Now, however, Brad, the silver lining is I ordered them for you online, but I had them delivered to USPS, so you should get them by Christmas.
And they'll be folded and destroyed by then. Okay, that is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. I spell his name because he has this incredible website, johncombest.com. Puts dozens of things on there every single morning, does this every morning for the past 23 years. What we do is we bring in this guy every morning.
I'm Casey Kasem.
At least Monday through Friday. And we do a countdown of the top 3 stories that John deems to be the most important. And we start off with, ironically, number...
In third place...
The Wall Street Journal published a piece highly critical of Josh Hawley. But this criticism isn't coming from the political left. No, it's coming from the Wall Street Journal's own editorial board, a woman named Alicia Finley. You can see her at times on Fox Business and Fox News. She was a former editor out in California, a conservative student group leader out there, and young journalist out there. And she's coming at Josh Hawley from the right. Here's her headline in the Wall Street Journal, Brad. Democrats find an ally in Josh Hawley. In 2018, he filed a lawsuit to overturn Obamacare. Now he's fighting against any Medicaid reform. Brad, this is a harsh one. And in this piece, Ms. Finley comes out and says that not only did Josh Hawley do the right thing by fighting against Obamacare years ago, but now he's supposedly flip-flopped. He's taken this populist stand that you and I have talked about quite a bit over the last few months. In fact, over the last 18 months, we've talked about this. And he's criticized House Republicans' plans to trim Medicaid. You know, Brad, he's come out and said, look, anything that touches Medicare or Medicaid is a no-go with me. It's a non-starter with me. And Miss Finley points out, she takes aim at one of his specific op-eds that he's written where he talks about the hardships that Medicaid cuts would have on, say, disabled families. Miss Finley points out that the cuts in the proposal from the House GOP wouldn't do anything to cut Medicaid from folks who are disabled. I'm kind of burying the lead here, though, Brad, because you get to the end of the piece, and Miss Finley says, Republicans back in 2013 saw through the fake populism of Ted Cruz. Now, according to Miss Finley, Mr. Hawley is pretending to be a real conservative, but she calls him a, quote, Trump counterfeit, especially one who wants to surrender to Democrats on policy. A Trump counterfeit, Brad. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that earlier in the piece, she points out how Josh Hawley has been teaming up with Bernie Sanders about credit card rates, how he's been teaming up with Elizabeth Warren to break up health insurers. Who is our status daddy here, Brad? It looks like it might be Josh Hawley. What do you think of all this, Brad?
John, I saw it coming. You know how I knew things were changing with Mr. Hawley. You know how that was?
Did he change his shoes?
Yes, he's no longer wearing the pirate shoes. He's wearing Birkenstocks, and he no longer has.
Oh no, he got those from Bernie.
Yeah, he no longer has the skinny jeans. He's now wearing cargo shorts. So, I think he's and the rumor is that when he's not on the House floor, he's got a hoodie on, and he's gotten to be good friends with a particular senator from Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard, John. I don't know if that's true or not.
Hey, Brad, if you make a ladder reference, then you've hit the golden trio of Brad slurs.
Oh, the fact that he's declared that ladders are illegal in the United States, and any ladder over 3 feet tall is because he doesn't want anybody climbing any ladders. You're right. I forgot.
Yeah,
that,
and he heard your rant last week about how you got to buy a cherry picker these days instead of just getting a big old ladder, you know?
Well, we talked about that there was an article I read that talked about that if the arch were built today, it could not be completed because it would they would never have any, it would not ever comply with OSHA regulations as far as the workers are concerned. But
hey, I'm glad you brought up the arch because that leads nicely into our second story in which we talk about another historic St. Louis landmark and a big name visiting there today.
Up a notch to number 2.
That's right, Brad. I'm not talking about the Gateway Arch. I'm talking about America's Center. And America's Center is going to be the host today for the GEOINT, Geospatial Intelligence. The geospatial industry is coming back to St. Louis. They had a big confab here 2 years ago. You know, St. Louis is trying to become the global hub for geospatial research. Excuse me, boy, let me try to say that again. Geospatial research and development and profit making, right? Not only does St. Louis have the NGA here, but we also have a number of private corporations who are trying to make some bucks in the industry. Brad, I'm pleased to report that today, when the floor opens at the symposium, Senator Eric Schmitt will be the keynote speaker. But that's not all, Brad. Today, the confab will host Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Brad, put on your best cowboy boots. I know you have a thing for Tulsi. This is pretty cool for St. Louis. Again, establishing this region as a hub, maybe even a global leader for geospatial research.
Well, I thought we already had that with the NGA and all that. Weren't we pretty much declared that already?
Yeah, I think so. But you know what? Do you think, Brad, that the San Franciscos of the world and the other tech hubs of the world are just going to let the St. Louis area get all the big grants? Of course not, Brad. We got to keep reinforcing our legacy here.
You know, there was a time, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but there was a time when if you talk to any municipality or any county, they were always talking about, oh, we're very much into GIS, you know, which is, you know, now you don't hear that as much anymore. But that's the whole NGA thing. You know, the GIS stands for Geographic Information Service or something like that. Essentially, where everything's plotted. And the amazing thing about this is, back in the day, if you wanted to have an address, like if you were going to build a subdivision, it was pretty easy to essentially go to the county and get it all mapped out and get it put on the official county, plat, whatever you want to call it. Now it's really complicated because this whole crazy thing. You've got to send information to all these different agencies. You got to send stuff to Google and places like that because everybody's got to know exactly, Latin law and all that kind of stuff. It's no longer to the point where you can't say, hey, I'm down the street from the Ted Drews. You know what I mean?
I get exactly what you're saying. This piece here, by the way, which is brought to us, I should note, by Nicholas Phillips. Once again, St. Louis Magazine doing bang up work on a local topic that you won't read about today in the Post-Dispatch or St. Louis Public Radio. He points out that the facility has a shot at hosting a federal pilot program to develop a geospatial workforce. So, Brad, to your point, maybe it's not a lock that St. Louis has everything, and St. Louis has to keep, forging ahead to keep getting these federal dollars coming here. And I do have to correct you on something, Brad. You define GIS. I went to, according to AI.com, and GIS actually stands for Gabbard is sexy. I think the guy that runs that website is biased, though.
Good old Tulsi. I get so much grief about talking about Tulsi. And do you know what's interesting? If I mention that on Facebook, I get women criticizing me all the time on Facebook. And you know what the newest thing is they criticize her about?
No idea.
She's got the Jack Danforth look.
She's got the Jack Danforth what?
Jack Danforth look. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like a big nose?
No. Jack Danforth had that weird spot on his head all the time that was like his hair. Well, in his younger years when his hair was dark, he had that white spot on his head. Remember what I'm talking about? I mean, in his hair.
No, I don't remember. Like in his hair?
Yeah, don't you remember this?
No, Brad, I was born in 1977. So Jack Danforth was completely gray by the time I escaped from my mother's womb.
He used to have this very interesting spot on his head where when he had a full head of hair and it was dark, there was a spot on his hair that was like white, always like that. And
interesting. I never knew that.
And Tulsi Gabbard now has the same thing, although it's not a spot. She's got like I don't know, a couple dozen strands of hair because her hair is still real dark because she's dark skinned. She's Pacific Island or whatever, and her hair is like black, except she's got one white streak down her hair. And the women...
Oh, I think that's cute. I haven't noticed it. But then again, I don't invest as much time looking at her pictures as you do.
Well, I've got them on my wall. They're all over my place.
I bet you do, Brad.
I mean, it's the wallpaper on all my computers, I mean, and matter of fact, I've actually cloned her voice through AI, and every morning my alarm goes off, and it's like, Brad, good morning, it's Tulsi. Wake up, honey. And I go, okay, Tulsi, thanks. It's her.
You wanted to make it as realistic as possible, so you had the voice say, why are you still here? Get your clothes and get out.
No, I didn't. Okay, time for number one.
The number one.
We'll go back to Senator Josh Hawley today, Brad. Josh Hawley is coming to the St. Louis area today. He'll visit storm-damaged areas in the St. Louis area today. Brad, this is on the heels of a Post-Dispatch piece where the headline is, the mayor doesn't know reason for the, quote, holdup and federal emergency response to tornado. Now, this story, by the way, which is brought to us by Blythe Bernard of the Post-Dispatch, she has the Cara Spencer quote that she doesn't know why the feds didn't act quickly over the weekend. I guess Cara expects federal bureaucrats to actually be working on a weekend. This story combines a lot of elements that the mainstream media loves. So they love to cover, if it bleeds, it leads. They love to cover tornado damage and devastation. But also this allows them to criticize the Trump administration. For example, in Blythe Bernard's piece, she says she doesn't know, or that the mayor stressed that she doesn't know, if budget cuts may be a factor in the lack of presence from FEMA here. And Spencer's quote is, I don't know what the holdup is. The price tag on the storm damage in the city, according to Blythe Bernard, has reached a conservative estimate of $1.6 billion with a B dollars. Now, that is according to Cara Spencer. So I would just point out, Brad, that the Missouri Net has a piece up today in which Hawley says that he is still trying to get the federal government to declare Missouri a disaster area for the storms that hit the state in March and again in April. And Hawley's quote is, oftentimes in the bureaucracy, we saw this in the Biden administration, where we often had to wait weeks and months to get anything back from them. I complained about it then, and I'll make the same case now, that we need assistance immediately. And I know that the president wants to deliver that assistance. I've been told by the White House that it's forthcoming, but we need it. So I'm sure today, Brad, again, no other news outlet that I saw bothered to acknowledge that Josh Hawley was coming to town today. However, maybe at these press conferences, he will be asked what the Trump administration will do about March, April, and now May storms.
You know, I'm going to ask a dumb question. Is the federal declaration all that important? I mean, you know, is that like a deal breaker?
I don't think so. So I'm not an expert on how exactly this works. So, for example, nothing kept people over the weekend from getting their chainsaws out and coming out and helping people that were devastated by storms and clearing debris and things like that. What it does come down to is who's going to pick up the tab for it. Now, Brad, I see a number like $1 billion, and I think, how many banjo papulas will make a ton of money by pretending that they, and this isn't to impugn Mr. Papula, who I'm sure does great work, but how many people like that will come out and claim to do storm damage and collect a nice check for it?
You know, so you're essentially saying that even in times of terrible, calamity, the scamsters are out there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I can't wait to see the number of people that will attempt to bill the city or FEMA for work that they didn't do. Like, anytime you have that much money, Brad, people are going to think, look, I could at least get my hand on 30 grand of it.
John, thanks to ChatGPT, yes, there are several photographs of former U.S. Senator John C. Danforth, that prominently feature a distinctive white patch in his hair, a characteristic he's had throughout his entire adult life. And if you want me, I'll send you some of these pictures. But hold on a minute. That was the running thing with him for years. He had, if I'm not mistaken, if you look at it from our perspective, it was on the right side of his head, which would have been, if you're looking at him from the front, it would be on his left side of his head. And I was thought to myself, how does that happen? Because it's always in the same
Brad,
spot.
I think it was at one of the workplaces where I worked at. I worked with a guy with dark hair who also had one big splotch of gray, and I wondered the same thing. Like, is that just a pigmentation freak?
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of, and like I said, that's the thing. I'll send you. You haven't seen the current pictures of Tulsi Gabbard, and it's the same thing. I believe it's on. If you look at the picture, it's on her right. I mean, if you're looking at her face, it's on her right side of her face. On hers, her perspective would be on the left side of her face. She's got this one long strand of white hair, and like I said, I don't know why it drives women nuts. But
does she try? Like, is it intentional? Like, did she dye it that way?
Okay. Can I tell you something that
Please do.
That one of my women listeners to the station, who sometimes I reference, but I will never give her name because she says catty things. She says, now you know the truth about Tulsi Gabbard. She's actually Cruella de Vil. So,
oh, and she says back in 2019 that the gray streak in her hair serves as a remembrance
of what?
Of fallen soldiers, Brad.
No. Seriously?
Yeah, this is from a CNN article from 2019. Have you ever Googled this?
Well, I haven't. I've just Googled images. I haven't Googled like a story. And she says the grace, she does that on purpose?
She says that she doesn't dye. She says she doesn't dye a gray streak in her hair because she wants it to serve as a remembrance of U.S. service members killed in the Iraq War.
For real?
Yeah, I'll send it to you over the break, Brad.
That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense nowadays, anyway?
So, yeah, I mean, what does make sense in these?
Then what's Jack Danforth's white spot for? What's his white spot for? Is that for is he like the White Stripes or something like that? Is he like a big Jack White fan or something like that?
You mean Danforth?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just got a text from Tom Eagleton, though. It says that he's electroshocked about it.
And did you also get something from Kit Bond?
No, he's not in the ground yet, Brad.
Okay. Man, this show went off the rails in a hurry, didn't it? Okay.
I'm sending you an email, and the subject line will be Tulsi Streak. I mean, if it has to do with Tulsi streaking, I know you're going to read it, Brad.
Okay. We have to go. We have to take a break.